Kumlen and Abla Gemara. We are up to Daf Nun Beis Amid Aleph. We explained the Machlekes Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yisrael, whether two curtains or one curtain, and so on. So with Nun Beis Amid Aleph, we are up to now about 4 lines from the top of the page. Amid Abnasan. Abnasan said, Amad Traxin. This particular curtain that divides, that segregates the Kodesh HaKadoshim from the Kodesh, and there were 2 curtains with a gap of an am in between. The Chachamim were not able to determine, or we're talking about Amatrax is actually the wall of the first Beis Hamikdash, which was an amma thick. And we said that Rashi says over here that Traxin means inside and outside. And Trak means, what do you call it? The Trak means inside and Sin means outside. So this is the 2 sides. Traxin, it separates 2 sides. And we're not sure what the status of the thickness of this wall is. The Chacham never determined. Is it considered like the Kodesh HaKadoshim or is it considered like the Kodesh? Maskiv Lo Ravina asks a question my time, but what's bothering them and why aren't they so clear? Is it because of the following pasuk where it says as follows, that Habayis Ashabona Melech Shlomo LaHashem, the building that the Beis Hamikdash, the Shlomo built for the Eibishter, Shishim Amos Orkai, the length of the base of the Mikdash itself was 60 Amma, and it's made up of 40 is the Heichel and 20 is the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and the Esim Rachvei, and the width is 20. The Shloishim Amma Kamasa, the height was 30 Amos. That's one pasuk. Uksiv, and then in the further pasuk it says, Va'aboyim ba'amma hoya habayis, that 40 Amos was the bayis or a Heichel. So the base of me, or the Heichel was 40 Amos lefane before me. So that was the 40. Excuse me. The remainder, the 20 Amos of Kodesh HaKadoshim, and then it says the lifnei hadvir, and before the dvir is the actual separation between the 2 rooms. Is esim amma oidech ve'esim amma oidech. So that means the other side of the wall, which is the Kodesh Kedoshim, was 20 amas wide, 20 amas long, and the Esim Amma Kamasa, 20 amas tall. There's a room on top of it. So now you tell me 40 is the Heichel, 20 is the Kodesh Kedoshim. So the wall itself, is it part of the 40 of the Heichel, or is it part of the 20 of the Kodesh Kedoshim? We don't know. Amatraxin, this particular wall, Mahani Esim, is it part of the 20 or Mahani Abba, is it part of the 40? We're Nun Beis of an Aleph, middle of the page. We're trying to work out that wall, the partition, whether it was part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, made up the 20 Amos, or was it part of the Heichel, it made up the 40 Amos? Says Gemara, who said either one? The Dilma Loi Mahani Esim, Mahani Abba, who told you that it's part of the 20 or the 40? Perhaps the Chalala Kochashim. Maybe when we say that the Heichel was 40 Amos, we're talking about the space in the Heichel. When we say the Kodesh Kedoshim is 20, we're talking about the space Kedoshim. But Kodesh like a Chashim, we're not counting the walls themselves; they're separate. Teid, I'll prove it to you. The Chol Heichel the Kochashim Kodesh. Whenever we calculate the measurements we tabulate the measurements of the Beis Hamikdash, we always count the wall separately and give you its depth. So the walls are always counted separately. So why are you telling me that the wall is either part of the 40, part of the 20? It's neither. It's separate. I'll show you. Whenever we talk about walls, lately today, we count the walls themselves. Now we learned in a Mishnah, the Heichel itself is Meya Amma al Meya Amma. That the Heichel itself was 100 Ammas by 100 Ammas. Baroim Meya was 100 Ammas tall. And now we calculate. How do you get 100 Amos? Koisel Ulam, the wall of the Ulam. Remember, you had in the Beis Hamikdash, you had an Ulam, which is like a room before the Kodesh. And this room here, the wall itself of that room was Chamish, was 5 Amos thick. So the walls already accounted separately. Then the Ulam, the space in the Ulam itself, the vestibule or the antechamber before you get into the main room, is Achas Eseh, was 11 Amos. You already have a total of 16. Koisel Heichel, the wall of the Heichel itself is 6. So you already have 21. The Arka Abayim Amma, and then you have 40 Amos in the Heichel, which is 61. The Amma Traxin, so we see it counted separately, 62. The Chof Amma Beis Kodesh HaKadoshim, another 20, so that's 82. Koisel Heichel Sheish, and then the wall behind the Kodesh HaKadoshim is 6, so that's 88. The Hator Sheish, and there was a room behind it at 6, so that's 94. and the koisel hator chamish, and then the wall behind that is 5, which makes 99, or did I miscalculate? Maybe Mr. Amatraxin. So all up is 100. But what do we see from here is that the walls are all counted separately. So why are you asking your question whether the koisel, the Amatraxin, was part of the Heichel or was part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim? It's neither. So it says the Gemara, what he actually meant to say, what Nosim meant to say was, Ella, of course it's not part of the 40 to 20. But the question is the sanctity of that wall, do we give it the sanctity of Kodesh HaKadoshim, or do we give the sanctity of the Kodesh? Ikel Ifnim, Ikel Chutz. Is it part of the inside or the part of the outside? It's Kedusha, not as the measurement, but what is the level of Kedusha of this wall? And this is especially important in the second base midrash when there's a gap between the two curtains. So you're able to stand there. Where were you standing? Were you standing in the Kodesh or the Kodesh Kedusha? Behind you, the Rabbi said, Boy Yosef Ish Hutzal, Yosef, who came from Hutzal, a person from Hutzal, he had the following question. And the question was, it says in the pasuk, "Udvir b'toich habayis." The pasuk is the following, and the dvir, that wall, is inside the house, and then it says mipnima, from within. Heichin l'sitin sham, from within, you prepared to put it into the Aron, into the Bris Hashem. In other words, inside that room, you were going to place the Aron, which housed the luchas. The question is the word v'dvir, the word mipnima. Is mipnima means you can read the pasuk two ways. Where do you put the comma? You can read the dvir b'teich habayis comma, that the dvir is inside the house. That's the kodesh. That's the heichel. And then mipnima, and beyond the dvir, right after the wall, is heichel l'shitn Hashem. That's where they placed the aron of Bris Hashem. So that, if you learn the pasuk that way, the comma goes afterwards bayis, and then the wall is part of the kodesh. The other way of learning is no.
Isn't there discussion about? Isn't there discussions about the door to the Ulam and the Heichal also as what they are, what the status is?
Regarding the door of the Heichal.
You know, the door to Ulam, is it part of the Azor, is it part of the Ulam? And the same with the Heichal, is it part of the Ulam, is it part of the... To
be honest, I don't remember exactly. I don't remember. But here the question is, how do you read the pasuk? When it says the word Mipnima, the way we just said a minute ago, the other way is V'dvir b'toich habayis mipnima heichin, that the dvir is inside the house, which means the kodesh HaKadoshim, inside, and that was the wall to prepare you to bring the kodesh HaKadoshim, to put the aron there, which means that the wall itself was part of the kodesh HaKadoshim. The question is, where do you put the comma? Says, I don't understand. You both have a question. You're telling me he doesn't know how to read the pasuk where you put the comma. Heichi comma kro. So the question is, how do you read the pasuk? V'dvir. This is, I'm going to explain now what the problem is. The problem was, do we read the pasuk with vir b'teich habayis b'prima heichin l'sitin sham, that so that the wall is part of the inside, or by dir mahakam vir b'teich habayis b'prima. That is, and so the question is, how do we read the pasuk? Yeah. So in other words, we read that it's vir b'teich habayis, and then mipnima heichin sham. So on the other side of the wall, that's where the Kodesh began. Or we read no, the dvir b'teich habayis mipnima. The dvir and mipnima go together. That the dvir itself is considered inside the kodesh HaKadoshim. So that's the suffix, but not whether the amas that were counted for the heichel the kodesh HaKadoshim include the wall. The question is which room. It's not what he meant. He meant the kedusha. Says the Gemara Mimsapko, you telling me that Yosef Ish Hutzal had this question? He didn't know how to read the pasuk. But Tanya, we learned Isa ben Yehuda. There was an Amora called Isa ben Yehuda. He said in total, Chamesh Mikroi b'Torah, there are 5 psukim in the Torah. Einan Hechra, we have no idea how to read the psukim. Where do you put the comma? One pasuk, for example, is Se'ez, that Cain was told that if you, it's not a pasuk, Hala'im Seitiv Se'ez, it's in the pasuk that if you do good, Se'ez, we'll see in a minute what that means, and then it says Imlai Seitiv. Now the question is Se'ez part of the Im Seitiv? Or is the se'ez part of Imlai Seitiv? Does se'ez mean halayim seitiv? If you do the right thing, se'ez you'll be forgiven. Is that what it means? Or do we say halayim seitiv? If you do good, very good. But otherwise, se'ez you will carry the sin Imlai Seitiv if you don't do tshuva. So where do you put the se'ez? The next one is mishukodim. When this Rashi brings the chumash, when it says over there that the cups were mishukodim over there. So how do we understand the word mishukodim? Right, so they're like almonds. What does that mean? Is the word mishukodim referred to the gevim, the cups, or Mishakadim referred to the flowers or the buttons that are on the menorah. And so that's another one. We're not sure where the word Mishakadim goes. And the next one is Mocher. Moshe Rabbeinu tells Yeshua, Amalek is there, Tzei, V'hilochem, Ba'amalek. He tells him, go fight with Amalek. Then it says Mocher, and then it says tomorrow, Anochi, and I will stand in or whatever, and I'll daven. So how do you read it? Do you put a comma after the Mocher as if to say, go fight Amalek tomorrow? Is that what he's saying? Or he's saying, Tzei, V'hiloch Amalek, comma, go fight Amalek today, and tomorrow I'll daven for you. Today you don't even need my davening. The next one is when Yaakov cursed out Shimon and Levi. It says he said he cursed them out for what they did, right? So the question is, again, how do you read? Right, it says V'tzainam ikrushar, and then it says order apam. The word order, is that to go back to shor or back to order? So is order part of the pasuk before? In other words, is he cursing Shechem, or is he cursing Shimon and Levi? Now this one here, the Shem have a difficulty because order is the beginning of a new pasuk. Why in the world would you think that order belongs to the pasuk before, and then the next word starts this pasuk? When order is the beginning of a new pasuk, it talks about Shimon and Levi, and some of us should say therefore it must say that even the psukim are not. Maybe are a subject whether the psukim we have today are accurate, which is hard to understand. The next one is V'kam. It says by Moshe Rabbeinu that he's going to pass away, and then it says V'kam that it says that you will pass away with your ancestors. V'kam. Now, two ways of reading it. One is V'kam, and one day you're going to stand up again. Others will be Tchis Amesim. Or the V'kam goes in the next part of the pasuk is V'kam ha'am hazeh v'zon, that the people, your nation, are going to, after you pass away, are going to betray the trust in Hashem, and they're going to follow Avodah Zarah. So there are 5 psukim that we have a doubt. So what's the problem? So he has a 6th pasuk, it's Dvir. So Yomar continues. Our problem is what Tanya we learned. Hu Yeshiv Ich Hutzel. The person known as Yosef Ish Utzel is also sometimes known as Yosef Abavli. He's also sometimes known as Isa ben Yehuda. He's also known sometimes as Isa ben Gur Aryeh, because Isa is like a slang of Yosef. He's also known as Isa ben Gamliel, and he's also known as Isa ben Mahalalu. But what his real name was, Isa ben Akiva Shmoi. Don't know the explanation why he had all these other surnames. So he says, the same person here, Isa ben Yehuda, who happened to be Yosef Shutzel, says there's only 5 doubts that he had, and yet now you tell me there's another one, Dvir. So that's not a problem. But the Raisa Leka, in the Torah, he only has 5 doubts. But in the Nevi'im, you have more. This is pasuk is in the Nevi'im. Says he more, but the Raisa Leka, you tell me the Torah is only 5, but Ikad isn't another one. The boy, the question. It says, Vayishalach is not Ibn Yisrael. He sent Moshe Rabbeinu before Matan Torah, sent not the young ones. But Yalu, they brought Oilais, Kvosim. They brought oilais, what do you call it? Kvasim sheep, vayidbchu zvachim shlamim, and they brought zvachim. La shlamim parim bulls. The question is, do we break it up? That the oilais, do we break it up and say as follows? It doesn't say the pasuk kvasim, it just says oilais, and then says zvachim shlamim Hashem parim. Do we read oilais kama? So the oilais were made out of sheep, and then the shlamim were made out of bulls, or or the word parim goes on both. It's one run-on sentence. It's not 2 parts of a pasuk. So you have another pasuk that we're not sure of. So when I answer that, Chizda had a doubt, but Yehuda didn't have any doubt. He was definitely convinced the way to read a pasuk. And Rashi says, interesting over here, that the argument is what trup it should be. Is it an asnachta? An asnachta basically tells you it's a semi-stop, and therefore whatever goes afterwards is like a new Indian. Or is it an azla gadish, and therefore it's continued with the next one. And that's the shaila, what the trup is. The Rishonim don't understand all of these 5 questions. Why don't we look at the trup and then see how to read it? To see how to read it. And that caused the big machlekes in understanding, do trup really have any guidance of the way we understand the pasuk? Because we learned the brachas that the trup comes from Moshe Rabbeinu, but does it really have any guidance the way you read a pasuk? Because if it does, then all these questions, you can just look at the trup and determine where the word seis is, where the word shekadim is, and so on. But the Ritva says a very interesting thing which changes everything around, because all the Achreinim have a big discussion. The Ritva says that this whole Gemara discussion is, if it would not have been for the trup, there's no way of understanding this psuk. In other words, the most psuk in the Torah, even without the trup, you read the pasuk, you know exactly the flow of the pasuk, what it's saying. These psukim here, intrinsically or inherently, it's very difficult to understand which way to learn. But now that we have a trup, the trup tells us which way to learn. That's what the Ritva says. But the Rashi, by saying over here, is we're not sure what the trup is. Sounds like Rashi saying here, the trup definitely is a determining factor. And the question, Guf, is what was the trup? So maybe according to Rashi, that's how you learn all the other sfeikas as well. What, even though we have a trup today, but who said that's the correct trup? Maybe the trup should be different. The only real difficulty is Oro, which begins another pasuk. Why would you even think it belongs in the preceding pasuk? Anyway, says the Gemara. Now we continue the Mishnah. So the Kohen Gadol is walking into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So we say there were two curtains. Hachitzaina, the outer curtain. If you remember, the two curtains, the outer curtain, the entrance is all the way on the south side. So you walk all the way to the left, and there is the entrance, and then you walk all the way to the right in the gap between the two curtains. You walk all the way make a beeline to the right, to the other side, and there was the entrance to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. We didn't want them together, so people shouldn't be able to peer inside. Hachitzaina, the outer curtain, is a proof min hadorim. It was on the end, it was like folded back and pinned up so that there was a gap there that a person can walk through. Upnimi is, but the inner curtain is min hatzaf. The inner curtain, that gap was on the very north. You go away to the north and you pull it. It was pulled back a bit and was always open. Mahal of B'nai, so he walks between the gap between the two curtains. Achi Magil Tzafri comes to the north. Higil Tzafri comes to the north. Hoifa Panadar, he turns his face to the south. Mahal, and now he's inside the room. So he's facing now back to the south. He's going to make a. As soon as he walks into Kodesh HaKadoshim, he's going to make a due left. And he goes left. Im hapareiches, following along the pareiches, achu magiel aron, until he comes to the aron. As it stands right now, the Gemara thinks we're talking about the aron itself. The problem is the curtains were the second base of English, and we already know that there was no aron in the second base of English. We learned before that there were 5 things missing. So the Gemara will talk about that. Higil aron, he comes to the aron. Noiset es hamachta, he places the shovel ben shnei abadim, between the two staves that stick out from the aron, and then he then what he does is Sabar esak teidus agabe gechol. Remember, you had a whole machlekes before. How do you put the coal on the how do you put the potatoes on the coal? Do you put in one lump? It takes a while to burn, so the smoke doesn't come up straight away. Or does he put he covers it one layer very thin, then another layer, so the fire catches very quickly, because you want to generate a lot of smoke. You have two opinions. But the Mishnah seems to clearly learn Sabar esak teidus agabe gechol, that you put a heap straight away. Then it's malek kolabai is kuliosh. The entire room is filled with smoke, as the Torah says. Yotze, he goes out. Ubol bededer beis knisas. He goes out the same way he came in, and he walks backwards. Doesn't turn around because it's inappropriate. So he's walking backwards. He steps backwards, but the same direction that he came in. Umispalel tefillah tzara. He davens a very short davening. The bais the chitzon. He davens a very short davening in the heichel. Why is short davening? We'll see later in the Gemara, because people were scared that he might have died, because a lot of Kohanim Gedolim died and the Kodesh HaKadoshim never came out. So we don't want everybody standing there on tender hooks. We don't want the people to stand that way. So therefore, he comes out straight away, makes a very short filler. So not to frighten the Yidden, thinking that he might not make it out. Says the Gemara, what are we talking about? Elam Bigdish Rishon, talking about the first base of Mikdash, Mehavi Parai, there's no curtains, there's a wall. Elo Mikdash, Shani is a base of Mikdash, Mehavi Aron, is there an Aron? But Tanya, we learn, Mission Nignis Aron, once the Aron was hidden, Nignis Imai, a couple of other things hidden with him as well, a few other things. One of them was Tzantzenes Aman, the jug of the man. So like Yirmiyah was telling the Eden that, you think you can't learn Torah because of Parnasa, look at the man. With Tzloichi Shemen and the jug of oil that they used to use to anoint the Kohanim Gedolim, and that was taken away. So it's a sense of Haman. And then what do you call it? It's Loichi Shemen Hamishcha, and the oil that they used to anoint and the stick of Aaron and its almonds, and also the buds. Even though all the buds overnight blossomed, became almonds, a few of them remained buds, so that they should remember the nest, how this is what it looked like, and became an almond within the same night. The Adgiz Shashogru Plishtim Doinel Israel, after the Plishtim stole the Odom, when they even went to war, and and they stole the Aron, and then it was a disaster. Everybody got affected. Anybody was housing the Aron got in trouble. Finally, they sent it back to the Eden. They sent along with it another box where they gave presents. In there was a bunch of gold mice and some other things. And they sent it. And that was also hidden. Remember, it says, Vikli Hazov, and the golden kalim that they brought back Osham for the guild to Simu Ba'agis Mitzid, they placed it in the box and the box next to it. Send it away. Says the Gemara, Mi Gonzi, who hid the Aron? Yeshio Gonzi. He hid it, Yeshio, which means the second base of Hamikdash. So even though Yeshio was Menashe's grandson, Menashe was a terrible Rasha, Yeshio was an unbelievable tzaddik. And he got rid of all the Avodah Zorah. Mara Shagona Gonzu, what in the world caused Yeshio to decide to hide the Aron and all of these things? Shikosu, because he read the pasuk. What happened was that after they get rid of all the Avodah Zorah, they walked through some of the rooms of the Beis Hamikdash, and they found the Sefer Torah and happened to be open to this pasuk. Rahman al-Islam, the Bible critics, they argue that that's when Chumash Devarim was written. But so he came, they opened up the Sefer Torah and they found it open to this very pasuk of the Teicha. And there it says, Yelech Hashem, Oischa Hashem will drive you as Malcha and your kingdom. Asher Tokim Melecha, that you place on you, they will all go out in Golus. So he realizes a message here to prepare yourself. So Ahmad, he went, and he hid it. And it says, he said to them who understood, the Chol Yisrael HaKadoshim, to all the holy people, Hashem, Tnuas Orna Kodesh, place the Orna Kodesh Bebayis in the house, Asher Bona Shleimah ben David Melech Yisrael, that Shleimah built. And Ein Lechem Masa Bakosef, don't carry it on your shoulders. After Ithashon can go and serve Hashem Besami, so the Jewish people. So he's telling them to go place it in the because Shlomo Melech already, when he built the Beis Hamikdash, he built some subterranean caves and all that storage places, and he told them to store it over there. How do you know the other thing to take in? You learn out Shama by On it says, I will reveal myself to you, Moshe Shama. And by the Mon it says, V'ten Shama Malay place over there, Malay. So that's Shama. Shama tells you that the Mon is ended up the same place as the Aron. And then we learn now the Asya Daidas, and we know that that the jug of oil will be learned out from the Mon. And how do you do that? Because it says by the Mon Lemishmeres. And it says by the jug of oil, for the says Mishcha Kodesh Yezeh, it should also be the so we darshan Daidas that they have to be put in the same way. And what about the stick of Aaron? The Asya Mishmeres. By stick of Aaron, it says Mishmeres. And it says to be assigned by Mori, and the same thing says also by the Mon. It says Mishmeres. So therefore, we know all of these things are stored. So there's no Aron in the second Beis Hamikdash. What are you telling me? The Kohen Gadol walks in and he stops by the Aron. So you're right. The place of the Aron, not the Aron itself. He places the shovel with the coal between the two poles. Where the two poles would have been. That's what he would have done. It says, okay, says the Gemara, we had in Shkolim, we'll have actually later in Yom as well. Not everyone agrees with Yoshio hid it. Some say it actually went into Bavel somewhere. It was hidden in Bavel. It ended up in Bavel. It's not at all in the Beis Hamikdash.
What light did he have in the Kodesh HaKadoshim? How did he see what he was doing?
How is it? We learned there's a skylight there. Remember, they used to lower the maintenance workers.
And that skylight brought light in.
I must be, yeah. So we have Psachim of hey. He piled the Titus on the coal. Tanan, this Al Mishnah follows Command says, that they actually put in one pile. Tony Chada, now one Bryce we learned, Soibra Panima. How do you put the ashes on? That you start from the outside, in other words, you start from the section of the shovel which is inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and you work your way towards yourself, which is the other side of where you are, and you slowly bring the coal over on the Titus as you bring closer to yourself. But Tanya, so you put the Titus on the coal as you bring closer to yourself. Tanya is exactly the opposite. You start dropping the Titus from closer to you, and you work your way outwards. It's actually Machlekes Tanoim. What about Mistabed? It makes more sense. Command Pnima makes more sense to what? That you start from the outer that's inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and you work your way towards yourself. Now we learn, we tell him, be very careful. Don't start putting the Titus on top of the coal from yourself and work your way out. Because the fire starts going, and you might burn your hand when you bring it back. This way, if you start the other way, as you go bring closer and closer, the fire is always behind you. Tell them what we learned. You should place the potatoes on the fire before Hashem. We already had this discussion before. You should place the potatoes on the fire inside the Kodesh Kedoshim. Don't put the potatoes on the fire outside and come in with the smoke already being generated. The yachnis to negate what the opinions looking. They say yachnis. Fix it up outside, put the potatoes on the coal outside, and have the smoke coming out, and then walk in. My Dorish, what's their basis? It says the pasuk, keep it on an I will come into Kapoides with the cloud already existing. So they learn, fix it up outside, by yachnis and bring it in. Can't be, but the Kohanim is another pasuk. We should place the potatoes on the fire in the room of the Kodesh Kedoshim. What do you mean when it says with the cloud you should come to Kapoides? One of the spices should be mala oshan, that secret thing that Beis Avtinus who didn't want to shave anybody. One of the herbs, and this herb, the smoke wafted its way up, and it was a very straight line like a stick, and that's what the oshan means. The anan means to bring in the mala oshan. How do you know you bring in mala oshan? It says the chisa anan haktoides es hakapoides, that the cloud of Torah should cover the kapoides. So see, that's vital to have this anan, this oshan. Says the Gemara, if you didn't include the mila oshan on Yom Kippur, if it's missing any of the spices, chayiv misa, you're chayiv misa, because the Torah wants them all. Like Gemara asked every question. But typically, if you're missing any of the spices, it's not Kodesh. If it's not Kodesh, you had no right to walk in Kodesh Kedoshim. For that alone, you chayiv misa. For that alone, you're coming in your chayiv misa. So why do you have to tell me because you need 11 and he's missing chayiv misa? Chayiv misa because if you didn't bring a proper Kodesh, then you walked into the Kodesh Kedoshim for no reason, and that alone, it says in the pasuk, you will die for. I'm going to say two answers. And talking about he didn't realize that walking in without the spices is a problem. So for that, you don't get killed. So shaggy. But he knew that you need 11. He knew you need all the spices, and he missed one out. And that's why you still chayiv misa. Rav Ashi says, no, I feel teme hazy bazu. He deliberately did not bring the right amount, and he knew that. But he going to ayil shtek, he brought two piles of potatoes. Achas shlema, one was full, so you could no longer accuse him of coming empty-handed. But Ach said the other one he brought in missing some of the spices. For entering empty-handed, he's not liable. The ayil shlema, he brought in a full one. But for roasting one of them without full spices, because you're bringing up a potatoes which is lacking. Okay, we'll stop here.